My name is Lauren Whitmore. I'm 39 years old. At 9:26 on the morning of April 18th, I sat at the far end of a glass conference table inside Harbor Line Title Services in Annapolis, Maryland, watching my husband hold a silver pen over a stack of closing documents he thought would make him the cleverest man in the room. Beside him sat his mistress. Her name was Callie Monroe. She was 31, wore a cream blazer I recognized from a photo I had once found in my husband's deleted messages, and rested her manicured hand on the folder marked Whitmore Refinance file as if she already belonged to my life, my marriage, and my house. My husband, Daniel Whitmore, glanced at me with the thin, impatient smile he used whenever he believed I was too timid to understand what was happening. Lauren, he said, tapping the paper with his pen, let's not make this emotional. This is just financial restructuring. Callie smiled without showing her teeth. It's really better for everyone if the house is handled by people who understand growth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just placed my leather folder on the table, opened it calmly, and looked at the title officer. Before anyone signs, I said, you should know the refinance is no longer possible. Daniel's smile froze. Callie's hand stopped moving. What they didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier, at 2:16 on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I had discovered Daniel had tried to put Callie's name on our mortgage documents behind my back. What they didn't know was that the house had never been as much his as he believed. What they didn't know was that our original purchase agreement contained one clause he had forgotten because men like Daniel rarely read anything they assume women will maintain for them. And by the time he brought his mistress to closing day, the house was already sold. Before I tell you how I got there, tell me where in the world you're watching or listening from and what time it is there. I always love knowing where these stories find people, especially women who have been betrayed, underestimated, and expected to stay polite while someone dismantled their life in front of them. If that kind of quiet comeback speaks to you, like this video and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Because this is not a story about revenge shouted across a room. This is that story. Daniel and I bought the house at 27 Mariners Key in Eastport 11 years earlier, on June 3rd, after a summer storm had washed the streets clean and left the harbor smelling like salt, diesel, and wet rope. It was a pale gray colonial with navy shutters, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a narrow brick walkway, and a backyard that sloped toward a row of crepe myrtles. It was not a mansion, but to me, at 28, it felt like proof that steady work could become shelter. I had saved for the down payment for 6 years. Daniel had helped, technically. He contributed $14,000 from a sales commission he received after closing a restaurant equipment contract in Baltimore. I contributed $76,400 from my savings, a small inheritance from my Aunt Melissa, and the sale of the condo I had bought before I met him. At the time, Daniel called that romantic. You're building our future, Lore, he said, standing in the empty living room with a bottle of grocery store champagne. I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret trusting me. He said it at 6:48 in the evening, barefoot on newly refinished oak floors, while rain tapped the front windows, and I believed him. Daniel was 32 then, charming in the way some men are charming when their ambition still looks like promise instead of appetite. He worked in commercial restaurant supply and could make a stranger feel chosen after a 5-minute conversation. He remembered waiters' names, tipped valet drivers generously when people were watching, and had a laugh that filled rooms before anyone thought to ask whether the sound had warmth in it. I worked as an operations manager for a regional logistics firm in Annapolis. My days were schedules, vendor contracts, route disruptions, freight audits, and the 1,000 tiny details that keep other people's chaos from becoming expensive. I liked order. I liked clean spreadsheets, labeled drawers, early mornings, and knowing exactly where the spare keys were. Daniel liked impressions. He liked expensive watches bought on payment plans. He liked restaurants with tasting menus. He liked saying, "My wife handles the details," as if details were a lower species of labor. He liked telling people he was building something, though the something changed every year. For the first few years, I thought we balanced each other. I made sure the mortgage was paid on the first of every month. He brought home flowers on random Thursdays. I tracked insurance renewals. He threw dinner parties. I organized our tax documents. He told friends, Lauren is the brain trust around here. Everyone laughed when he said it. So did I. At first, our marriage began to tilt slowly enough that I blamed myself for noticing. Daniel did not become cruel overnight. Men like him rarely do. They test the edges first. The first clear test happened at a 4th of July barbecue at our house 5 years into the marriage. I had spent 2 days preparing the backyard. White string lights along the fence, mason jars with tea candles on the patio table, a cooler of drinks labeled with small chalkboard tags because Daniel had invited 2 clients and wanted everything to look effortless but elevated. At 7:12 that evening, one of his clients, a man named Rick Dorsey, complimented the crab dip. Daniel put his arm around my shoulders and said, Lauren's good at this kind of thing. Give her a list and a deadline, and she turns into a very attractive project manager. Everyone laughed. I smiled, because that is what wives are trained to do when humiliation arrives dressed as praise. Then Callie Monroe laughed too. I did not know she was Callie then. She had come with Rick's group as a junior brand consultant for a hospitality startup Daniel had been courting. She wore a yellow sundress, wedge sandals, and a perfume that smelled like gardenias and expensive soap. Her laugh was high and deliberate, the kind of laugh that makes sure the person being laughed at hears every note. Daniel looked at her a second too long. Not long enough to accuse, long enough to remember. Later that night, after everyone left, I was carrying empty plates into the kitchen when Daniel leaned against the counter and said, Callie said, you seem very stable. Stable? She meant it as a compliment. I rinsed a platter under warm water. What did you say? I said you are. You're my steady girl. My steady girl. He kissed my temple as if he had given me a gift. The second test came the following winter after Daniel's sales numbers dropped. His company restructured commissions, and he began coming home later, irritated by normal things. The hallway light, the dishwasher noise, the way I asked whether he wanted dinner reheated. One Friday in February, at 8:35 in the evening, he came home smelling of bourbon and cedar cologne. I had made lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, and green beans. He looked at the plate and said, Do we have anything less suburban? I stared at him. What does that mean? He loosened his tie. Nothing. I'm just tired of feeling like my life stopped at mortgage payments and baked chicken. I set the plate down. He laughed softly. Don't look wounded. I'm allowed to want more. I never said you weren't. No, you just make wanting more feel irresponsible. There it was, the reframe. My steadiness had become his cage. The third test came with money. Daniel had always treated our joint finances like a household convenience rather than a shared responsibility. I paid the mortgage. He paid utilities when reminded. I funded repairs. He bought patio furniture. I reviewed statements. He trusted me, he said, which meant he did not want questions about what he spent. By the 10th year of our marriage, there were hotel charges he explained as client meetings, dinner receipts he called networking, and one recurring payment to a boutique fitness studio in Washington, D.C., where he said he had joined a men's mobility class. Daniel hated exercise. On November 9th, at 10:52 at night, while he showered, his phone lit up on the bedroom dresser. The notification said, Callie M. I hate sleeping alone after you leave. I stood there in my bare feet, holding a basket of folded laundry. The shower ran. Steam moved under the bathroom door. I looked at the message until the screen went dark. I did not open the phone. I did not throw the basket. I did not pound on the bathroom door with wet betrayal burning through my chest. I put his socks in the drawer. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and watched my hands. They did not shake. That surprised me more than the message. When Daniel came out wrapped in a towel, he said, "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I looked at him. His hair was wet. His wedding ring sat on the marble tray beside the sink. "No reason," I said. He believed me because Daniel had spent years mistaking my restraint for ignorance. After that night, I began paying attention differently. Not suspiciously, precisely. I noticed he changed his phone passcode on November 11th. I noticed he started saying the DC account instead of naming clients. I noticed he bought a navy cashmere scarf on December 2nd and did not give it to me. I noticed Callie Monroe followed his company page and liked every photo he appeared in, including one from a restaurant industry expo in Philadelphia where Daniel's hand rested on the small of her back in a group shot. I did not confront him. Confrontation would have fed him. Daniel was best in argument, where he could turn volume into evidence and injury into inconvenience. Instead, I gathered facts. I built it in silence. On January 5th, I opened a private checking account at Chesapeake Mutual Bank with $100. On January 7th, I changed the password on my personal email and moved every household document into encrypted cloud storage. On January 10th, I requested copies of our original closing packet from the title company that had handled the house purchase 11 years earlier. On January 14th, I called a family law attorney named Marin Fields, whose office overlooked a narrow street in downtown Annapolis. Marin was 51, with silver blonde hair cut to her jaw and the calmest voice I had ever heard. Her office had framed botanical prints on the wall and no visible family photographs. I appreciated that. Some rooms should belong only to facts. I sat across from her at 3 o'clock on January 17th and told her everything I knew. The text message, the spending, the late nights, the house, the money. She listened without interruption, taking notes in blue ink. When I finished, she asked, "Are you safe at home?" "Yes." "Do you want a divorce?" I looked at the paperweight on her desk. It contained a tiny preserved fern. "Yes," I said, "but not yet." "Why not yet?" "Because I need to understand the house." Marin leaned back slightly. "Tell me about the purchase." I gave her the numbers. My down payment, Daniel's contribution, the joint mortgage, the deed. Then I mentioned something I had almost forgotten. "When we bought it, my aunt's inheritance had conditions," I said. "She left the money to me before I married Daniel. My real estate attorney insisted on some clause at closing, something about protecting my premarital contribution if the property was transferred or refinanced. I signed it, Daniel signed it, and he complained for 2 days that it made him feel like a guest in his own house." Marin's pen paused. "Do you have that document?" I requested the old file. "Get it," she said. On January 24th, the title company emailed me a scanned copy of the purchase agreement addendum. I printed it at work at 6:12 in the evening after everyone had gone home. The office lights had dimmed to half brightness. Snow flurries moved outside the dark windows. I stood by the printer and read the clause slowly. In the event of refinance, title modification, equity withdrawal, transfer, encumbrance, or proposed addition of any third party to loan or deed instruments, Lauren Elise Whitmore shall retain sole right of refusal and independent authority to force sale or demand repayment of protected premarital equity prior to execution. I read it again, then once more. Daniel had signed below it on June 3rd, 11 years earlier, in black ink. His signature was large, impatient, and slightly slanted. I took the document to Marin the next morning. She read it twice. Then she looked at me over her glasses. "This is unusually strong." My attorney at the time was my aunt's friend. "Remind me to send her flowers." "Can I use it?" "If he attempts to refinance, add a third party, draw equity, or alter the loan structure without your consent, yes. Depending on the exact paperwork, you may be able to stop the transaction, force sale, or demand repayment before closing. What if he already started? Then we find out how far he got. The answer arrived on March 26th at 2:16 in the afternoon. I was at home because a water main repair had closed my office building. Rain streaked the kitchen windows. Daniel was supposed to be in Washington for meetings. A courier knocked on the front door and handed me a sealed envelope from Severn Crown Lending. "Signature required," he said. I signed. Inside was a refinance disclosure packet addressed to Daniel and Lauren Whitmore. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Interest rate, payoff estimate, appraisal requirement, closing date tentatively listed as April 18th. Then I saw the borrower information page. Daniel Joseph Whitmore, Lauren Elise Whitmore, Callie Ann Monroe. For several seconds, the rain was the only sound. Callie Ann Monroe, listed as co-borrower for refinance consideration, proposed occupancy interest, supplemental income documentation attached. My husband had not merely had an affair. He had tried to lace his mistress into the financial bones of my home. I turned the page. There was an authorization form with my name typed beneath a signature line. Unsigned. Daniel had not gotten that far yet. He still needed me. That was the moment I stopped being Daniel's steady girl and started becoming the owner of my own exit. When Daniel came home at 8:47 that night, I was making tea. He kissed my cheek. "Long day. Yours or mine?" He paused for half a second. "Both, probably." He did not see the envelope. I had placed it in my locked file box upstairs. He opened the refrigerator. "Anything for dinner?" "Salmon." He made a face. "Anything less responsible?" I looked at him over the rim of my mug. "Not tonight." He laughed, not realizing I had meant every word. The next day, March 27th, I met Maren at 8:30 in the morning. I placed the refinance packet on her desk. She read the borrower page and said nothing for almost a full minute. Then she asked, "Do you want to stop the refinance or force the sale?" "Which gives me the cleanest break?" "Sale?" "Then sale." "Do you understand what that means?" "Yes." "You will need to move quickly, quietly, and properly. The house may need valuation. If Daniel contests, we document his unauthorized attempt to add a third party and use the clause. If the property is marketable, you can accept an offer before his closing date, but you cannot lie. You cannot forge. You cannot hide marital assets. Everything must be documented." "I don't want to lie." "Good!" "I want him to walk into the truth." Maren nodded. "That can be arranged legally." I did not hire the flashiest real estate agent in Annapolis. I hired the most efficient one. Her name was Patrice Bell, 56, with cropped black hair, tortoise-shell glasses, and a reputation for selling waterfront-adjacent homes before sellers finished repainting the trim. She arrived at Mariner's Key on March 29th at 7:45 in the morning, wearing navy trousers, loafers, and a camel coat. Daniel had left at 6:20 for what he called a breakfast pitch. Patrice stepped inside, looked around for 15 seconds, and said, "You keep a clean house. That helps." "I keep a documented house," I said. "Even better." She walked through each room with a tablet. Living room, dining room, kitchen with white cabinets and blue tile. Upstairs bedrooms, primary bath, backyard, foundation, roof age, HVAC, water heater, neighborhood comps. At 8:36, she stood in the kitchen and said, "If we price this properly and allow a private pre-market showing list, I can get you offers fast." "How fast?" 48 to 72 hours. "I need discretion." "Then we don't put a sign in the yard. We use broker network and qualified buyers only." "What about my husband? Is he living here?" "Yes." "Does he know?" "No." Patrice looked at me carefully. "I need to stay within the law." "So do I." "Then your attorney gives me the green light in writing." At 9:12, Maren emailed authorization referencing the clause. Daniel's unauthorized refinance attempt, and my right to initiate forced sale proceedings. Patrice read it, nodded once, and began measuring the dining room. I spent the next week living two lives inside the same house. In one life, I was Daniel's wife. I ordered groceries. I took the dry cleaning ticket from his dresser. I listened while he complained about interest rates, client delays, and how impossible it was to build wealth with someone who thinks small. In the other life, I packed my exit into banker's boxes. I removed my Aunt Melissa's china from the dining cabinet and wrapped each plate in white paper at 6 in the morning before Daniel woke. I copied tax returns, mortgage statements, insurance records, appraisal documents, utility bills, and bank statements. I photographed every room. I made an inventory of furniture purchased before the marriage and furniture purchased jointly. I transferred sentimental items to a storage unit on Bay Ridge Avenue. My grandmother's quilt, my mother's old mixing bowl, 3 framed prints, my college diploma, and the blue glass lamp from my first apartment. Daniel noticed almost nothing. On April 2nd, at 9:58 at night, he stood in the bedroom doorway while I folded a sweater into a suitcase. Going somewhere? Work conference next month? He nodded. Good. Maybe you'll relax. You've been intense lately. I have. A little. He smiled. Don't take that as criticism. I won't. He walked away, already bored by my inner life. The first private showing happened on April 3rd at 11:15 in the morning. I was supposed to be at work, but I took an early lunch and met Patrice 2 blocks away at a coffee shop while a couple from Alexandria toured the house with their agent. Daniel was in D.C. Cali, according to the fitness studio charge on the shared card, was probably teaching a branding workshop 3 blocks from his hotel. The couple liked the house but wanted a larger yard. The second showing happened at 4:40 that afternoon. A retired Navy captain and his husband loved the kitchen but needed space for a woodworking studio. The third showing happened on April 4th at 8:30 in the morning. Their names were Nathan and Priya Shah. He was a pediatric surgeon at Anne Arundel Medical Center. She owned a small architecture firm. They had 2 children, 1 dog, and a pre-approval letter that made Patrice hum under her breath. They stayed inside the house for 38 minutes. At 9:12, Patrice called me. They're making an offer. At 11:23, she forwarded it. $928,000. Cash-heavy financing, 15-day close, inspection for information only, flexible occupancy, earnest money deposit within 24 hours. I sat in my car outside a print shop and stared at the number. Daniel and I had purchased the house for $489,000. We owed $296,000. Even after fees, protected equity repayment, and marital division, the sale would give me enough to leave cleanly. At noon, I called Marin. Can I accept? Yes, she said. We notify Daniel after acceptance, not before. The clause gives you leverage, not invisibility. He will have the right to legal response, but given his refinance attempt, he is in a poor position. At 12:37, I signed the offer electronically from my car. My finger hovered over the final button for 1 second. Not because I doubted, because every house contains ghosts of the person you were when you believed you would grow old there. Then I pressed submit. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sold the house. Daniel came home that night at 10:04 with a bottle of wine I knew he had not bought for me. He found me reading at the kitchen table. Good news, he said. Is it? Refinance is moving, closing on the 18th. We need to sign a few things next week. I turned a page in my book. We? He took off his jacket. Don't start. What am I starting? That suspicious tone. I looked up. What are we refinancing for? Liquidity. For what? Opportunities. What kind of opportunities? He sighed. Lauren, I am trying to set us up for the next phase, and every conversation with you feels like getting audited by a school principal. I closed the book. Daniel hated closed books. They meant attention had become unavoidable. Who is Callie Monroe? His face did not collapse. Daniel was too practiced for that. It tightened in 3 small places: jaw, nostrils, left eye. She's part of a consulting group. Why is she listed as a co-borrower on our refinance packet? He stared at me. Then he laughed. That laugh. The one he used when he needed to make reality seem unsophisticated. You opened my mail? It was addressed to both of us. It's preliminary paperwork. Why is she on it? Because she has capital access through her firm. That is not an answer. It's a strategy. Putting your mistress on our mortgage is a strategy? There, I had said the word. Mistress. It landed between us with no decoration. Daniel's eyes cooled. You need to be careful. With what? Accusations. Is she your mistress? He walked to the sink, poured a glass of water, drank half of it, and set it down. Then he said, Callie understands what I'm building. It was almost elegant in its cowardice. I nodded once. I see. Do you? Because this doesn't have to become ugly. The house has equity. We can structure things like adults. You keep security, I keep momentum. Callie comes in as a financial partner. Nobody loses. Nobody loses. I almost admired the sentence. The man had managed to describe adultery, financial betrayal, and attempted displacement as a group benefit. What exactly does Callie get? I asked. An interest position. In my house. Our house. My down payment. Our marriage. Your affair. His face flushed. Don't weaponize language, he said. I stood, picked up my book, and walked toward the stairs. He followed me. Lauren, where are you going? To bed. We're not done. I am. At the landing, he said. You won't stop this. I turned back. He was standing in the foyer under the pendant light, handsome, angry, and still certain the world would rearrange itself around his confidence. No, I said quietly. I won't. He thought I meant the refinance. That was useful. If you have ever watched someone mistake your calm for permission, write steady in the comments. Some people only understand boundaries when they arrive in writing, notarized, witnessed, and too late to negotiate. And if stories about women taking their power back without begging for recognition matter to you, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. There are more of us than people like Daniel ever counted on. The following week moved with the precision of machinery. Inspection happened April 7th at 2 o'clock. Daniel was told it was an insurance inspection related to the refinance. He hated paperwork so much he accepted the explanation without reading the calendar invitation. The Shaw's inspector found minor issues: a loose handrail, aging caulk around the upstairs shower, one outlet needing replacement in the guest room. Patrice negotiated a $2,000 credit. I approved it. On April 8th, Marin served Daniel formal notice of sale action, protected equity claim, and divorce filing preparation. She did it at his office. At 11:48 in the morning, Daniel called me 17 times. I did not answer. At 12:16, he sent a text. What the hell did you do? At 12:22. You sold the house? At 12:24. Lauren, pick up the phone. At 12:31. You don't get to do this. At 12:40. Callie is freaking out. That one made me sit back in my chair. Callie is freaking out. Not my wife is hurt. Not I betrayed you. Not I am sorry. Callie is freaking out. I placed my phone face down and returned to the vendor contract I had been reviewing. At 1:10, my office receptionist called. Lauren, there's a Daniel Whitmore here asking to see you. I looked through the glass wall of my office. Daniel stood near reception in a charcoal suit, hair slightly disordered, speaking with his hands. Please tell him I'm unavailable, I said. At 1:12, I saw security approach. Daniel looked past them and found me through the glass. For 1 second, our eyes met. I did not look away. He did. That evening, I stayed with Alicia Monroe. no relation to Callie. Alicia had been my best friend since college, a corporate accountant with a townhouse in Severna Park and a guest room decorated in sage green. She opened the door at 7:34, took one look at my two suitcases, and said, "Guest room is ready. Wine or tea?" "Tea." "Good. Wine makes men like Daniel seem more interesting than they are." I laughed for the first time in days. Not loudly, just enough to recognize myself. Daniel sent emails through midnight, some angry, some pleading, some managerial. He claimed I had misunderstood. He claimed the refinance was temporary. He claimed Callie was only helping. He claimed I had embarrassed him professionally. He claimed marriage required trust. At 2:06 in the morning, he wrote, "We can still fix this if you come home and stop listening to lawyers." I did not respond. On April 10th, Callie emailed me. Subject line, "Woman to woman." I opened it in Marin's office because some letters deserve witnesses. "Lauren, I know this situation is emotional, but Daniel and I have been trying to create a path that minimizes disruption. He has spoken often about how much he respects your stability. I never wanted to hurt you. The refinance was meant to help transition everyone into a healthier financial arrangement. I hope you can see that holding on to the house out of anger only hurts all of us. Best, Callie." Marin watched my face as I read. "Do you want to respond?" she asked. "Yes." I typed one sentence. "Callie, I am not holding on to the house." Then I sent it. Marin smiled for half a second. Efficient. On April 12th, Daniel filed an emergency objection to the sale. His attorney argued that the property was marital and could not be sold without his consent. Marin responded within 3 hours, attaching the clause, the refinance documents listing Callie, proof of my protected premarital equity, and correspondence showing Daniel's attempt to alter financing without informed spousal consent. The hearing was set for April 16th at 10:30 in the morning. I wore a black dress, a gray blazer, and small pearl earrings. Daniel arrived with his attorney and Callie. That was the first time I'd seen her in person since the barbecue years earlier. She was pretty in a polished, expensive way. Auburn hair in soft waves, gold hoops, nude heels, a leather tote that probably cost more than my first car payment. She looked at me as if expecting me to tremble. I did not. The judge was a woman named Honorable Denise Halpern. She reviewed the filings with the tired focus of someone who had seen too many people confuse betrayal with strategy. Daniel's attorney spoke first. He described the sale as unilateral, retaliatory, destabilizing, and emotionally motivated. Marin stood and described the clause. She did not raise her voice once. She explained my premarital contribution. She explained Daniel's signed acknowledgement. She explained the refinance attempt. She explained Callie's proposed addition as a third party. She explained that the sale did not hide assets, but preserved them before Daniel encumbered the property. Judge Halpern looked at Daniel. "Mr. Whitmore, were you attempting to add Miss Monroe to refinance documents connected to the marital residence?" Daniel's attorney stood. "Your Honor, the paperwork was preliminary." The judge said, "I asked Mr. Whitmore." Daniel cleared his throat. "It was a potential financial arrangement." "Were you having a relationship with Ms. Monroe at the time?" His attorney objected. Judge Halpern allowed the question only as it related to financial motive. Daniel looked at Callie. Callie looked at the table. "Yes," he said. The word was small, smaller than the marriage it ended. Judge Halpern denied his emergency objection at 11:18. The sale could proceed, with proceeds held according to documented equity interests and pending divorce allocation. Daniel's face went pale. Callie's lips parted slightly. I gathered my folder. Outside the courtroom, Daniel approached me near the elevators. "Lauren." I stopped. Callie stood 10 feet behind him, arms crossed. "You don't understand what you've done," he said. "I do." "You're burning down 11 years." "No," I said. "I'm selling the structure." You burned down the marriage. His mouth tightened. You used to be kind. I still am. Kind people don't do this. I looked past him at Callie, then back at him. Kind people don't put their mistress on their wife's mortgage. The elevator arrived. This time, I stepped inside with Marin. The closing remained scheduled for April 18th. Daniel believed until the last possible moment that he could still regain control. Men like Daniel often confuse delay with victory. He called Patrice. She referred him to Marin. He called the lender. They informed him the refinance file had been suspended pending title disposition. He called the Shaw's agent and implied litigation. Their agent called Patrice, who sent the court order. He called my parents, who lived in North Carolina and had always liked him because charming men are easiest to love from a distance. My mother called me on April 17th at 7:15 in the evening. Lauren, Daniel says you're selling the house out of spite. I was sitting in Alicia's guest room, folding a navy sweater. Daniel tried to put his mistress on the mortgage. There was a silence. Then my mother said, Oh. One syllable. Years of politeness collapsing inside it. Dad knows? He is in the kitchen, pretending not to listen. I'm filing for divorce? I think, she said carefully, that may be wise. My mother had never been dramatic. That was her version of outrage. At 8:50, Daniel texted, Tomorrow, you need to act like an adult. I wrote back. I planned to. Closing day arrived bright and cold, with a hard blue sky over Annapolis Harbor. I woke at 6:10 in Alicia's guest room and lay still for 1 minute, listening to the house settle around me. At 8:45, I met Marin in the parking lot outside Harbor Line Title Services. You ready? She asked. No. She nodded. That's allowed. But I'm steady. That matters more. Inside, the conference room overlooked a narrow strip of water where sailboat masts stood like thin black lines against the sky. Patrice was already there with the buyer's agent. Nathan and Priya Shah arrived at 9:05, polite and nervous, carrying cashier's checks and a folder of identification documents. They smiled at me with the careful kindness people show when they know they are walking through the ending of someone else's story. Daniel arrived at 9:19. With Callie, he had brought her to the closing of my house. For a moment, even Marin looked surprised. Callie wore the cream blazer. Daniel wore his navy suit and a burgundy tie I had given him for our 9th anniversary. He did not look ashamed. He looked strategic. The title officer, a man named Owen Clark, looked between them and his seating chart. Ms. Monroe. Daniel said, She's an interested financial party. Marin's face did not change. She is not a party to this transaction. Callie smiled. I'm here for support. I thought about all the years I had supported Daniel invisibly. The payments made on time, the receipts filed, the repairs scheduled, the parties hosted, the future protected, while he searched for someone more exciting to admire him for spending what I preserved. Support, such a delicate word when stolen. Owen cleared his throat and began reviewing documents. Daniel interrupted twice to question allocations. Marin answered both times with references to the court order. Callie whispered something to him at 9:24. He nodded, then looked at me. Lauren, he said, tapping the paper with his pen, let's not make this emotional. This is just financial restructuring. Callie smiled without showing her teeth. It's really better for everyone if the house is handled by people who understand growth. That was when I opened my folder. Before anyone signs, I said, you should know the refinance is no longer possible. Daniel's smile froze. Owen looked confused. The refinance file is not part of today's sale closing. I know, I said, but Daniel and Ms. Monroe may still be under the impression that this closing can be used to preserve their refinance position. Marin placed a certified document on the table. This is the lender's termination notice, she said. The attempted refinance involving Ms. Monroe was formally canceled yesterday at 4:32 in the afternoon due to lack of lawful title pathway, court order, and withdrawal of spousal authorization. Callie's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Color left her cheeks in a clean line. Daniel leaned forward. What are you talking about? Marin continued. Additionally, the sale proceeds will not be released to Mr. Whitmore directly. They will be held in escrow pending allocation, with Miss Whitmore's protected premarital equity satisfied first according to the original signed addendum. Owen looked at his screen. That matches the updated settlement instructions. Daniel turned to me. You arranged this? No, I said. You triggered it. Callie looked at Daniel. You said the equity would be accessible. The room went silent. There it was. Not love, not healing, not growth. Equity. Nathan Shaw looked down at his documents. Priya pressed her lips together. Patrice removed her glasses and cleaned them with a cloth. Owen stared at his screen with the intense neutrality of a professional trying not to become a witness emotionally, even though he already was one. Daniel whispered, Callie, not now. She pulled her hand away from the folder. You said after closing we could restructure? Marin said calmly, There is no we in this transaction involving you, Ms. Monroe. Callie's eyes flashed. I was told I had an interest. I looked at her then. You had an interest in my husband, I said. Not my house. Short, clean, true. Daniel's face reddened. Lauren, stop. I did not stop because I had barely begun. For 11 years, I paid the mortgage on the first of every month. I handled the insurance, the repairs, the taxes, the records, and the down payment you like to call our beginning whenever it made you sound sentimental. You tried to add another woman to the financial structure of my home without telling me. You treated my steadiness as something you could spend. You were wrong. Owen's pen hovered above the paper. Callie stood. I'm not going to sit here and be insulted. Marin looked at her. No one is requiring you to remain. Daniel grabbed her wrist lightly. Callie. She pulled away. You said she wouldn't fight. The sentence landed harder than any insult. You said she wouldn't fight. I almost thanked her for the honesty. Daniel looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the real emotion underneath his performance. Fear. Not fear of losing me. He had risked that long before. Fear of losing control of the story. I signed my documents at 9:48. My signature was smaller than Daniel's, neater, steadier. When Daniel's turn came, he stared at the page for so long that Owen finally said, Mr. Whitmore, the court order permits the transaction to proceed. Refusal to sign may result in additional action, but it will not revive the refinance. Daniel picked up the pen. Callie left the room before he signed. Her heels clicked down the hallway, fast and uneven. Daniel watched the door close behind her. Then he signed. At 10:26, the house at 27 Mariner's Quay no longer belonged to us. The Shaws thanked me quietly. Priya said, We can tell this was a loved home. I looked at her and found that the sentence did not hurt as much as I expected. It was maintained, I said. Then I added, I hope it becomes loved again. Outside, Daniel waited near the elevators. His tie was loosened. His phone buzzed in his hand. I assumed it was Callie, or his attorney, or someone else he needed to persuade that none of this was his fault. Lauren, he said. I stopped because I wanted to know what a man says when the floor finally refuses to hold his performance. He looked older in the hallway light. We didn't have to end like this. No, I said. We didn't. I made mistakes. Yes! Callie was... He stopped, looked toward the exit. It got complicated. No, it got honest. He rubbed his forehead. I don't know where I'm supposed to go tonight. For 11 years, that sentence would have moved me into action. I would have found a hotel, made a call, solved the immediate discomfort so we could avoid the deeper wound. I looked at him calmly. That is no longer my responsibility. He stared at me. Lauren. There was my name again, used as a handle. I did not pick it up. Marin joined me at my side. The elevator opened. We stepped in together. As the doors closed, I saw Daniel standing alone beside the title office plant, holding a phone that would not save him from himself. The aftermath was quieter than people imagine. No one applauded. No one clapped. No music swelled. The house sale recorded at the county office at 2:14 that afternoon. My protected equity was wired into my separate account by 4:58. Marin filed the divorce petition the next morning at 9:03. Daniel moved into a corporate apartment near BWI and told mutual friends the separation was amicable but financially complex. Callie stopped appearing in his public posts by May. By June, Alicia heard from someone who heard from someone else that Callie had taken a consulting job in Miami and was telling people Daniel had misrepresented his situation. That was almost funny. Almost. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment overlooking Spa Creek. It had white walls, old floors, morning light, and no memories waiting for me in corners. The first night I slept there, I woke at 2:30 in the morning and listened for Daniel's key in the door. There was no key. Just quiet. Real quiet. Not the silence of swallowing words to keep peace. Not the silence after being insulted at your own table. Not the silence of waiting for a man to come home from somewhere he claimed was nowhere. This was clean quiet. Mine. My mother visited in July. She brought hydrangeas and stood in the middle of my new living room, looking at the harbor through the windows. It's peaceful, she said. Yes! She touched the back of my sofa. I should have asked more questions about Daniel years ago. I poured iced tea into 2 glasses. Maybe. I liked that he seemed successful. He liked that too. She smiled sadly. We sat by the window at 4:15 while boats moved slowly through the water. After a while, she said, Are you lonely? I thought about it. No, I said. I'm unaccompanied. There's a difference. She nodded, though I am not sure she fully understood. Daniel tried to apologize in August. He sent an email first. Lauren, I've had time to reflect. I recognize that some of my choices caused pain. I wish we had communicated better. I hope someday we can remember the good years without bitterness. Daniel, some of my choices caused pain, communicated better. He still wrote like a man stepping carefully around his own footprints. I forwarded it to Marin and did not answer. Then, on September 7th, at 5:42 in the evening, he came to my apartment building. The concierge called up. Miss Whitmore, there is a Daniel Whitmore asking if you will see him. I almost said no. Then I looked around my apartment, at the clean counters, the hydrangeas dried in a vase, my aunt's watch resting on the side table, the life I had not rebuilt completely, but had begun. Send him to the lobby seating area, I said. I will come down. I wore jeans, a white shirt, and flat sandals. No armor, no performance. Daniel stood when he saw me. He looked thinner, less polished. His hair had grown out at the sides. Thank you for coming down, he said. I sat across from him, not beside him. He clasped his hands. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I waited. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry about Callie. I'm sorry I tried to make financial decisions behind your back. I'm sorry I underestimated you. That last sentence mattered. Not enough to undo anything, but enough to mark the first time he had named the real structure beneath the damage. Thank you, I said. He looked relieved too soon. Does that mean we can talk? We are talking. I mean, really talk. Maybe dinner. No. The relief left. Lauren, I just apologized. I heard you. Then why are you still punishing me? There he was. not fully changed, just briefly coached by consequence. I stood. I'm not punishing you, Daniel. I'm declining to return. He looked up at me. After everything? After everything. I left him in the lobby with the apology he had offered and the reconciliation he had assumed it purchased. That is something I wish more women understood. An apology is not a receipt. It does not automatically buy access to the person you harmed. It does not reopen a door simply because someone finally knocked instead of trying the handle. I think about the house sometimes. Not every day. Not painfully. Sometimes I imagine Priya Shah choosing paint colors, Nathan making coffee before early hospital rounds, children dropping backpacks in the hallway, a dog scratching at the back door, new laughter moving through rooms where old betrayal once hid under polished surfaces. I am glad the house did not remain a monument to my marriage. Homes should hold life, not evidence. As for Daniel, I do not hate him. Hate is too heavy to carry into a future you are trying to enter cleanly. I understand him better now than I did when I loved him. He was a man who wanted the benefits of a steady woman and the admiration of an unstable life. He wanted my discipline to underwrite his risks. He wanted my home to become collateral for his ego. He wanted my silence to mean consent. That was his mistake. My silence was never consent. It was preparation. If you are listening to this while someone in your life calls you difficult because you started reading the documents, asking the questions, checking the accounts, or protecting the thing you built, please hear me. You are not cold for becoming careful. You are not bitter for becoming informed. You are not destroying a life by refusing to finance your own betrayal. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is not shouted. It is signed, filed, recorded, delivered on time. And sometimes the door you close is not the end of love. It is the beginning of self-respect. Thank you for spending this time with me and with Lauren Whitmore's story here on Ultimate Revenge. Stories like this are for every woman who has been called stable while being used, loyal while being lied to, and dramatic the moment she finally protected herself. If this story reached something quiet in you, I hope you remember that your calm is not an invitation for someone to take more. It can be the place where your next life begins. Follow Ultimate Revenge for more stories about women who were underestimated, betrayed, and quietly took their power back. So tell me, if your husband tried to put his mistress on your mortgage, would you confront him immediately, or would you quietly read every clause first?